My name is James, but everyone calls me Jamie. I live in a small town in the US with my family, and something really exciting just happened. I got a chance to visit London for the very first time. I always dreamed of going there. The big red buses, the black taxis, the Queen's Palace, and those double-decker buses always looked so cool in pictures. Now, I am going to see it all with my own eyes. I packed my suitcase the night before my flight. I made a list so I wouldn't forget anything: clothes, snacks, my toothbrush, and most importantly, my camera. "Mom, do you think I packed too much?" I asked as I struggled to zip the suitcase. Mom just smiled. "You'll be fine, Jamie," she said. "Just make sure to take lots of pictures." The plane ride felt really long, but it was also fun. I watched movies, had snacks, and looked out of the window as we flew over the ocean. I was both excited and a little nervous. "What if I get lost?" I whispered to myself, but I knew I had maps on my phone and my dad gave me some tips. Always look for landmarks like Big Ben or the London Eye. That way you'll always know where you are. When the plane landed, I took a deep breath. Here I am. London, I said out loud. The airport was so busy, with people speaking all kinds of languages. I got my suitcase, and soon I was on a train heading to the city. As the train moved, I saw beautiful old buildings, small houses, and wide parks through the windows. London looked different from my hometown, but in the best way. I stepped off the train, and the first thing I noticed was how polite people were. "Mind the gap," a voice said when I got off the train. It made me smile because I had heard about that phrase before. People really said it here. While walking down the streets, I noticed people enjoying tea in little cafes and reading newspapers on park benches. I decided to visit a cafe first. "Can I have a hot chocolate, please?" I asked the lady at the counter. "Of course, love," she said with a kind smile. The hot chocolate was warm and sweet, perfect after the long flight. Then I spotted a big red bus. I had to ride it. I jumped on the bus, climbed to the top deck, and found a seat by the window. The view from up there was amazing. We passed by old churches, colorful markets, and the River Thames. I also saw the Tower Bridge. It was huge and looked just like in the pictures. As I got off the bus, I noticed something funny. "People here drive on the left side of the road," I said to myself. That was so different from back home. I had to remember that every time I crossed the street, a helpful tip: always look both ways twice. Next, I walked towards the famous Buckingham Palace. There were many people standing outside, hoping to see the guards in their tall black hats. I tried to make one of them smile, but they stayed very still. They must be really good at their job, I whispered to another tourist, and she giggled. The weather was a bit cloudy, but it didn't bother me. Dad told me before I left, Jamie, always carry an umbrella in London. You never know when it might rain. I was glad I remembered because soon, tiny drops started to fall. I quickly found a small shop to buy a postcard. I wanted to send one to my grandparents back home. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, I wrote, London is amazing. I saw Big Ben and even rode a double-decker bus. Wish you were here. Love, Jamie. After writing the postcard, I walked along the river and saw people selling things, paintings, clothes, and even street food. I bought fish and chips, a popular dish here. It smelled so good. This is delicious, I said to myself, enjoying every bite. I noticed people speaking with British accents, which sounded really cool. I tried to copy them quietly, saying, cheerio and brilliant. I giggled at how funny I sounded, but it was fun to try. As I continued exploring, I saw the London Eye, a giant Ferris wheel. Wow, that looks so tall, I said. I couldn't resist, so I bought a ticket and hopped on. The view from the top was breathtaking. I could see the whole city spread out beneath me. It felt like being in a dream. London had so many parks too. I walked through Hyde Park and saw people feeding ducks, riding bicycles, and relaxing on the grass. A friendly squirrel even came close to me. Hello, little guy, I said softly, offering it a piece of my sandwich. It grabbed the food and ran away happily. I decided to visit a museum next. I found the British Museum, which had so many interesting things from all over the world. I learned about ancient Egypt, saw old coins, and even spotted a real mummy. It felt like traveling through time. By the time evening came, the streets were glowing with lights. I found a small theater showing a musical, so I bought a ticket and enjoyed the show. The actors sang beautifully, and the music made me want to dance in my seat. I clapped so hard at the end that my hands started to hurt. The next morning, I woke up early to visit more places. I went to Covent Garden, a lively place with street performers. One performer made a balloon animal for me. Thanks a lot, I said happily. Walking through the city, I kept discovering new things. I found a shop that sold only Harry Potter things, which made me super excited. I bought a little wand as a gift for my sister back home. I also tried riding in a black taxi, and the driver was really friendly. First time in London, he asked. Yes, and I love it, I replied. He gave me a lot of tips, like visiting Camden Market for cool clothes and checking out the Tower of London for stories about kings and queens. I followed his advice and went to the Tower of London. It was so old and full of history. I even saw the crown jewels, which were shining and beautiful. It made me feel like I was part of a story from long ago. Later, I found myself at a bookstore and bought a small book about London to keep as a memory. The lady at the counter said, "Enjoy your stay, young man." I smiled and said, "I already am." It was getting late, but I didn't feel tired. London felt like magic, and I didn't want the day to end. I thought about calling my parents. "Hey Mom, guess what? I fed a squirrel, rode the London Eye, and saw the crown jewels," I said, excitedly telling her everything. There were still so many places I wanted to see. Should I explore more markets, visit the zoo, or maybe try afternoon tea next? The choices seemed endless. The next morning, I woke up full of energy, excited to explore more of London. After a quick breakfast of toast and jam, I decided to try something new. Maybe I'll have proper afternoon tea today, I thought, remembering how popular it is here. But first, I wanted to visit a few more landmarks. I headed straight for the Natural History Museum. As soon as I walked in, I was amazed by the enormous dinosaur skeleton towering over the entrance. "This is so cool," I whispered. There were rooms full of fossils, gemstones, and even an exhibit on volcanoes and earthquakes. I spent hours there, imagining what life must have been like millions of years ago. After leaving the museum, I made my way to St. Paul's Cathedral. The grand building with its giant dome was incredible. I climbed up the narrow stairs to the top, which was a bit tiring, but the view was worth every step. I could see the River Thames shining in the sunlight and tiny people walking far below. "London really is beautiful," I whispered to myself. By now, it was time for lunch. I remembered a tip from the taxi driver about visiting Camden Market, so I went there. The market was bustling with people, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. I tried a little bit of everything: Indian curry, a slice of pizza, and even a sweet crepe with Nutella. "This food is amazing," I said between bites. After lunch, I continued to explore Camden Market. There were colorful clothes, handmade jewelry, and even paintings by street artists. I bought a little keychain with the Union Jack flag to keep as a souvenir. While wandering through the market, I stumbled upon a small shop selling vinyl records. The shop owner looked at me and said, "Looking for something special?" I shook my head. "Just exploring," I replied. I ended up chatting with him about music for a while, and he even played a song on an old record player. The scratchy sound made me smile. Feeling adventurous, I decided it was time to experience afternoon tea. I found a cozy tea room not too far from the market. The waitress brought me a 3-tiered tray filled with little sandwiches, scones, and cakes. "Do you take milk with your tea?" she asked kindly. I nodded, eager to try it the traditional way. The tea was warm and soothing, and the scones with clotted cream and jam were delicious. I felt like royalty, sitting there with my fancy tea set. As I enjoyed the moment, I thought, maybe I should bring some tea home for Mom and Dad. I made a mental note to find a tea shop later. After tea, I walked along the south bank of the River Thames. Street performers were everywhere, some playing guitars, others juggling, and one even dressed as a statue. I dropped a coin in his hat, and he gave me a playful wink. This city is full of surprises, I thought. I crossed the Millennium Bridge, which swayed just a little under my feet, and headed toward the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. I didn't get to see a play, but I took a tour inside. Standing on the wooden stage felt magical, as if I had traveled back in time. To be or not to be, I whispered, pretending to be an actor. The day was passing quickly, but there was still one place I really wanted to see: Piccadilly Circus. When I got there, the bright lights and giant screens made me feel like I was in the middle of a movie. People were everywhere, tourists taking pictures, locals hurrying home, and street artists performing. I stopped to watch a breakdancer spin on his head, amazed by his moves. As night fell, I decided to take a ride on the Thames Clipper, a boat that travels along the river. The lights of London reflected on the water, making everything look magical. I sat quietly, enjoying the cool breeze and the peaceful sound of the boat cutting through the water. When the boat ride ended, I walked back to my hotel, feeling happy and tired. I couldn't believe how much I had seen and done in just a couple of days. What an adventure, I thought as I lay down in bed. But even as my eyes started to close, I knew there were still places left to explore. The next morning, I woke up early, excited to make the most of my day. I stretched, yawned, and thought about where to go next. The zoo? Greenwich? Or maybe the street art tour. After a moment, I smiled. Let's start with the zoo and see where the day takes me. London Zoo is one of the oldest zoos in the world, and I was eager to see the animals. The weather was bright, with just a little chill in the air, perfect for a day outdoors. When I arrived, the zoo was already buzzing with families and kids running around, pointing excitedly at the animals. The first animals I saw were penguins swimming playfully in their pool. I couldn't help but laugh as they dived and zoomed through the water like little rockets. Look at that one, I said to a boy standing nearby, and he grinned at me. Next, I saw the lions lounging under a tree, their golden fur glowing in the sunlight. One lion gave a big yawn, showing its sharp teeth. Glad I'm on this side of the fence, I whispered to myself with a chuckle. I also visited the monkey enclosure, where a little monkey swung from branch to branch, making funny faces at the visitors. I took a picture and thought, this will make my friends laugh back home. In the reptile house, I saw huge snakes curled up under heat lamps. One snake flicked its tongue at the glass, making me jump back a little. After spending hours at the zoo, I grabbed a sandwich from a food stall and ate it by the lake. Ducks swam close to me, hoping I'd share, but a friendly zookeeper reminded me not to feed them. They get spoiled enough, she said with a wink. With the zoo adventure complete, I decided to visit Greenwich next. I hopped on the tube, following the map my dad gave me. The underground trains were fast, and I enjoyed watching the colorful signs flash by as we stopped at different stations. When I reached Greenwich, it felt like stepping into a quiet village within the city. I walked through Greenwich Park, where kids flew kites and people enjoyed picnics. At the top of the hill stood the Royal Observatory, and I couldn't wait to see it. Inside, I stood on the prime meridian line, the line that divides the eastern and western hemispheres. Now I'm standing in two places at once, I said, feeling amazed. From the hill, I could see the Cutty Sark, a famous old ship, shining in the distance. I went down to explore it, climbing aboard to see what life must have been like for sailors in the old days. The ship's creaky wood and tall sails made me feel like an explorer heading off on a grand voyage. After Greenwich, I made my way to Shoreditch for the street art tour. Shoreditch felt completely different from the quiet of Greenwich, full of energy and creativity. Colorful murals covered the walls, and every corner seemed to tell a story. A guide led us through hidden alleys, showing us graffiti by famous artists. "Look at this one," he said, pointing to a giant painting of a cat. The artist hides small messages in every piece he creates. I searched for the message and found a tiny word painted in the corner: hope. As the tour ended, I spotted a food truck selling fish tacos. Why not, I thought, grabbing one. The flavors were amazing, with a bit of spice that warmed me up. While eating, I noticed a nearby group of musicians setting up. They began to play, and soon people were dancing in the street. I joined in, laughing and twirling with strangers. London really knew how to surprise me at every turn. Later that evening, I wandered toward Tower Bridge, which looked magical under the lights. I found a bench nearby and sat quietly, enjoying the peaceful moment. The water shimmered below, and the gentle hum of the city felt calming after the day's adventures. It was almost bedtime, but part of me wasn't ready for the day to end. There's still so much more to do, I thought. I pulled out my phone and checked my list: the Science Museum, the Tate Modern, and maybe a trip to see the city from the top of the Shard. And of course, I still needed to find a good tea shop to bring some tea back for Mom. Maybe I should also visit a bakery to pick up some treats for my sister. I smiled, feeling excited about tomorrow. There was no way I could fit everything in one day, but that just meant more adventures to look forward to. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light of the London sky, feeling a gentle breeze coming through the window. I stretched, excited and ready for another day of exploring. After a quick breakfast of toast and jam, I checked my list again. So many choices, I thought, smiling to myself. But I remembered how much I enjoyed the idea of tea and cakes yesterday, so I decided to have a relaxing day first. I made my way to a famous tea shop I had heard about, called Fortnum Mason. The shop was beautiful, with big windows and elegant displays. As soon as I walked in, the smell of fresh tea leaves and baked goods filled the air. There were shelves full of colorful tins of black tea, green tea, fruity tea, every kind you could imagine. "Mom's going to love this," I whispered as I picked out a tin of English breakfast tea. I also grabbed some Earl Grey for myself, remembering how delicious it was when I tried it the other day. After choosing the tea, I found a seat in their tea room upstairs. The room was decorated with soft colors, and the sound of light piano music filled the air. It felt calm, like stepping into a peaceful world far away from the busy city. I ordered the classic afternoon tea, and soon, the waiter brought over a beautiful 3-tiered tray. There were tiny sandwiches with cucumber, egg, and salmon, scones with clotted cream and strawberry jam, and little cakes that looked too pretty to eat. "This is the life," I thought, smiling as I took a sip of my tea. I spent a long time there, enjoying every bite and watching people around me chat and laugh. It was nice to slow down for a while after all the adventures I had in the past few days. But as I finished the last piece of cake, I started to feel the excitement bubbling up again. I still had more of London to see. Leaving the tea room, I decided to head over to the Science Museum. I'd heard it was full of interesting things, and I was curious to check it out. The museum was huge, with different floors dedicated to all kinds of science space, technology, medicine, and more. The first thing I saw when I walked in was a giant steam engine. It was massive, and I stood there for a moment, imagining what it must have been like when it was first invented. The space section was amazing. I saw models of rockets and learned about astronauts who had gone to the moon. "One day, I'd like to see space myself," I whispered. There was even a spacesuit on display, and I took a picture next to it, pretending I was about to go on a mission. One of the coolest parts of the museum was the interactive section. I got to try different experiments, learning about how planes fly, how sound travels, and how light bends through glass. I spent hours playing around with the displays, feeling like a kid discovering the world for the first time. As I left the museum, I noticed it was already late afternoon. I had spent way more time there than I planned, but I didn't mind. Time for one more stop, I thought, pulling out my map. The Tate Modern was nearby, and I had always been curious about modern art. So I headed that way, crossing over the Millennium Bridge again. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the river, and the view was breathtaking. The Tate Modern was unlike any museum I had been to. The building itself was huge and felt a bit like a factory, with tall ceilings and large open spaces. Inside, the art was different. Some pieces were paintings, but others were sculptures, videos, and even entire rooms designed to make you feel something. I walked slowly through the galleries, stopping to stare at a painting that was just a big red square. At first, I didn't get it. How is this art, I thought? But then I started to think about how the color made me feel strong, bold, a little intense. Maybe that's the point, I whispered. Modern art was like a puzzle, and I enjoyed trying to figure it out. There was one room filled with tiny lights hanging from the ceiling, like stars floating in the air. I stood there for a long time, feeling calm and peaceful as I watched the lights twinkle. It reminded me of looking up at the sky on a clear night back home. As I left the Tate Modern, the sky was dark, and the city was glowing with lights. I walked along the riverbank, enjoying the cool air and the reflections of the city in the water. The London skyline looked magical at night, so different from the busy daytime. I thought about all the places I had been and how every part of the city felt like a new adventure. There was one last thing I wanted to do before calling it a night. I had heard that the view from the Shard, London's tallest building, was incredible. I made my way there, feeling a bit nervous about how high it was. But when I reached the top, all my worries disappeared. The view was stunning. London stretched out as far as I could see, with tiny cars and glowing streetlights below. I felt like I was on top of the world. Standing there, I thought about how far I had come on this trip. From the red buses to the busy markets, the peaceful parks, and the historic landmarks, I had seen so much, but I knew there was still more to discover. London was full of surprises, and every day felt like a new chapter in an exciting story. I took a deep breath, looking out at the city one more time before heading back to my hotel. Tomorrow's another day, I thought with a smile. But what should I do next? Should I visit the famous Kew Gardens? Or maybe take a boat ride to explore more of the River Thames? Or should I head outside the city to see some of the nearby castles and countryside? There were still so many adventures waiting. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and eager to decide my next adventure. I sat up in bed, stretched, and gazed out the window. London's sky looked a little gray, with soft clouds floating above. Maybe today is perfect for something outdoors but peaceful, I thought. Then an idea hit me. Kew Gardens. I had read about its beautiful glasshouses and exotic plants. It sounded like the perfect escape. After a quick breakfast, I made my way to the tube station, humming to myself as the train sped toward Richmond. When I arrived at Kew Gardens, the entrance alone felt magical. Tall, ancient trees lined the paths, and colorful flowers peeked out from bushes along the way. I took a deep breath, and the air smelled fresh, like a mix of rain and blooming flowers. The first place I explored was the Palm House, an enormous glass house filled with tropical plants. As soon as I walked in, warm, humid air surrounded me, making me feel like I had stepped into a jungle. I wandered among the tall palms, ferns, and banana trees, marveling at the giant leaves. "It's like I've traveled to another part of the world," I whispered to myself. Tiny droplets of water clung to the plants, and the sunlight streaming through the glass roof made everything glow. Next, I climbed the Treetop walkway, a high platform that gave me a bird's eye view of the garden. It was a bit scary being up so high, but the view was worth it. I could see the tops of the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and beyond them, the Thames River winding its way through the landscape. The wind ruffled my hair, and I smiled, feeling light and free. I spent hours wandering through Kew Gardens, visiting the Waterley House, where giant lily pads floated lazily on the water, and the Princess of Wales Conservatory, home to rare orchids and desert plants. I even discovered a hidden Japanese garden with stone lanterns and a small, peaceful pond. Sitting there for a moment, I listened to the birds singing and thought, "This must be one of the most beautiful places I've ever been." After leaving Kew Gardens, I decided to take a river cruise back into central London. I found a boat departing nearby, and soon I was gliding down the River Thames. The boat rocked gently, and I leaned over the side, watching London's landmarks drift by the London Eye, Big Ben, and the Tower of London, each looking majestic in the afternoon light. The captain pointed out sights as we passed, sharing little stories about the city. "See that building over there," he said, pointing to a sleek, glass structure. "It's called the Gherkin. People say it looks like a giant pickle." The passengers chuckled, and I couldn't help but smile. London truly had a way of mixing the old and the new in the most charming way. By the time the boat reached the city center, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. I felt hungry, and the thought of fish and chips popped into my mind. Fish and chips it is, I decided, heading toward a cozy pub I had read about. The pub was warm and lively, with friendly chatter filling the air. I ordered a plate of crispy fish and chips with a side of mushy peas and sat by the window. When the food arrived, it was perfect, the fish golden and flaky, the chips hot and salty. I squeezed a bit of lemon on top and took a bite. "Delicious," I whispered with satisfaction. While enjoying my meal, I noticed a group of locals playing a game of darts. They invited me to join them, and soon I was laughing and throwing darts, trying my best to hit the bullseye. I didn't win, but it didn't matter. The fun and the friendly atmosphere made it one of the best moments of the day. As the night grew darker, I decided to end my day with a ride on the London Eye. I walked along the South Bank, the giant Ferris wheel glowing against the night sky. The queue wasn't too long, and soon I was inside one of the glass capsules, slowly rising above the city. From the top of the London Eye, London sparkled like a sea of stars. The Thames flowed quietly below, and the city stretched out in every direction. I could see everything: Big Ben, the Shard, and even the twinkling lights of Tower Bridge in the distance. It felt like the perfect way to end the day, floating above the city I had grown to love. As the capsule made its way back down, I thought about how much I had experienced. Every day in London had felt like a new adventure, one filled with history, beauty, surprises, and the kindness of strangers. But even after all I had seen, I knew there was more waiting for me. The next morning, I woke up feeling that familiar buzz of excitement. After days of exploring, I still had so much left to see and do. As I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I thought about the possibilities. Should I go to Windsor Castle? Or maybe visit the countryside and see the famous Stonehenge? Both sounded amazing, but I felt like starting the day with something nearby, something relaxing. Then it hit me: a visit to Hyde Park. I'd heard it was one of the biggest parks in London, with open green spaces, gardens, and even a lake. It sounded like the perfect way to start my morning, so I grabbed my jacket and set off. When I arrived, the park stretched endlessly before me, a peaceful oasis right in the heart of the city. I wandered along the paths, surrounded by trees that were just starting to show hints of autumn. The leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and the air smelled fresh and cool. I smiled, thinking, this is exactly what I needed. I made my way to the Serpentine, a large lake in the middle of the park. People were rowing boats on the water, and ducks paddled happily near the edge, hoping for a crumb or two from passing visitors. I decided to rent a small paddle boat and spent the next half hour gliding across the calm water. The soft splash of the paddles and the peaceful view of the trees reflecting on the surface made me feel completely at ease. After returning the boat, I wandered through the rose garden, where hundreds of colorful roses bloomed. The flowers smelled amazing, and I couldn't resist stopping to take pictures. I also found the famous Peter Pan statue, tucked away among the trees. It looked exactly like something out of a fairy tale, with Peter standing tall and mischievous, surrounded by tiny bronze fairies and animals. "Never grow up," I whispered, smiling at the statue. Feeling a bit hungry, I stopped by one of the park's little cafes for a snack. I ordered a hot chocolate and a pastry, sitting by the water to enjoy the view. While I sipped my drink, I noticed people riding bicycles, jogging, and even practicing yoga on the grass. Hyde Park felt like a place where everyone could just be themselves. After leaving the park, I decided to visit Kensington Palace, which was just a short walk away. The palace looked grand, and I imagined what it must have been like to live there as royalty. I took a tour inside, learning about Queen Victoria's life and seeing beautiful rooms filled with history. One of my favorite parts was the exhibit showcasing the dresses worn by Princess Diana. It felt surreal to see them up close. As I walked through the palace gardens, I thought, what a peaceful day this has been. But I knew I still had energy for one more adventure before the day ended. The idea of Windsor Castle popped back into my mind. Why not, I said to myself, excited at the thought of seeing one of the Queen's residences. I caught a train from Paddington Station, and in less than an hour, I arrived in the charming town of Windsor. The castle loomed majestically over the town, with stone walls and towers that looked straight out of a fairy tale. As I walked toward the entrance, I couldn't help but feel a bit like royalty myself, entering such a historic place. Inside, the castle was stunning. I explored the state apartments, which were filled with grand chandeliers, fine paintings, and golden decorations. Each room seemed more magnificent than the last. I even got to see St. George's Chapel, where many royal weddings had taken place. The stained glass windows were breathtaking, and the air inside felt solemn and peaceful. Before leaving, I walked along the castle grounds, taking in the view of the lush gardens and the surrounding countryside. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the landscape, making it look even more magical. This trip just keeps getting better, I thought happily. On my way back to the train station, I stopped at a small bakery in town and bought some shortbread cookies to take home. Mom will love these, I thought, imagining her smile when I gave them to her. As the train carried me back to London, I stared out the window, watching the countryside roll by. I felt grateful for every moment I had spent in this incredible city. Each place, each person, and each new experience had made my trip unforgettable. When I finally arrived back at my hotel, the sky was dark, and the city was glowing once again under the night lights. I felt both tired and satisfied, but I knew that tomorrow would bring more opportunities for adventure. Should I visit Stonehenge next? Or maybe take a trip to Oxford and see the famous university? There was still so much waiting to be discovered.